SMMA, a term you're probably all familiar with at this point.
But trust me here, the number of agency owners I see how to start an SMA in 20.
SMMA has taken off over the last.
In the last 2 years, the internet has been flooded with this term. But how profitable is it really? And more importantly, is it as big of a deal as it's made out to be? Today, we are going to dive into exactly why SMMA isn't as relevant as it used to be, and why programmatic marketing agencies have been gaining so much traction in recent years. But before we jump into that, let me clarify something. I'm not here to claim that it's impossible to run a profitable SMMA in 2024. I know and work personally with some that are doing exceptionally well, but they typically agree that the field has become much more competitive in recent years. First, let's cover what SMMA is and how it operates. At its core, SMMA is a type of marketing agency where the agency takes over a brand's social media presence in exchange for payment. Nowadays, there are many different social media platforms from Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, etc. An SMA would focus on one or more of these platforms, reach out to businesses and offer them to grow the social media presence in exchange for payment. In my experience, payment can occur in two ways. While very large agencies typically take a percentage of the advertising budget, many smaller agencies either get paid on a fixed amount each month or an hourly rate to manage the client's campaigns. In the case of very large agencies I've worked with for help, typically they take between 5 to 10% of the advertising budget as fee to run the campaigns, and typically do so with full transparency. But where it really gets trickier is with smaller agencies. I've seen some ask for a fixed fee of a few $1,000s and also take a percentage in the back of the client. Others simply taking a fixed cost based on the hours of work expected. And finally, others always work on a percentage of ad spend. So you can see there are many different ways of operating a business. But now let's understand why SMMAs are dying. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's quickly discuss why SMMAs are becoming less and less profitable over the years. I would argue there are three main reasons for this. The first reason is pretty obvious: the competition. It makes a lot of sense that after hundreds of YouTubers and influencers have sold the dream of how profitable and desirable this job can be, a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon. Consequently, there are now thousands more agencies trying to take a slice of a pie that has hardly grown more than 40% in the last 2 years. But competition itself shouldn't be a deterrent for profitability. The notion that if you're good at it, you can make it work should apply, right? And this brings us to the second point: the algorithms. When I started advertising with Facebook over 10 years ago, it was still pretty much the Wild West in terms of best practices. The reporting wasn't as refined as it is now, and nobody really knew what they were doing. But times have changed. In the last 5 years, the algorithm used by these platforms have become so powerful that most campaigns now run on autopilot once the algorithm picks a few conversions. And for this reason, it's becoming much harder for any agency to prove its worth when the algorithm is likely going to optimize itself after only a few days. To explain why the algorithm has increased so much, let's take a quick step back. In recent years, there has been incredible advancement in machine learning algorithms, aka recreating very complex systems similar to brain cells to be able to quickly analyze thousands of data points at once. Not only that, but as we humans have become more and more connected, the amount of data available for these platforms to harvest and use has increased drastically. And this is for this exact reason that we now often joke about how much TikTok and Instagram understands us, as they manage to keep us hooked for several hours a day with videos that pique our interest. But competition and algorithms alone shouldn't saturate a market this much. There must be more and more businesses that don't want to bother with advertising themselves, right? Well, not really. We have to remember that as time goes on, more and more people born into social media are climbing to higher and higher position in companies. These same people probably also understand the power of these algorithms and have a solid understanding in marketing. This is why more and more companies have decided to simply internalize social media marketing. If you understand how it works and have some young tech-savvy individuals working with or for you, you might as well ask them to take care of it, right? And this approach is both more profitable and more secure. So what's left now? Are companies internalizing everything? Is there no way for agencies to make money selling marketing campaigns? The answer is loud and clear in the market: follow the money and the innovation. From there, one form of marketing has literally exploded in recent years. So much so that in 2022 it generated more revenue than social media and search engines combined. This form of advertising is called programmatic advertising. If you watched the last episode of our Ad Chronicle Season 1, you might remember we touched on this briefly. Nowadays, all of the advertising formats that used to be bought directly from publishers are found on centralized platforms. Whether you want to advertise on podcast, live television, or screen out of home, or even any website you like, you can do so with programmatic advertising. Imagine the headache it must have been 10 years ago if you were an agency and your client wanted to be on 10 different TV channels and 10 news websites just for 1 month. The logistics and organization for one campaign must have been a nightmare, but not anymore. If I now want to advertise on 10 different channels and websites, I would just contact what we call an SSP and ask them to make me a deal to buy on a DSP. But wait a minute, DSPs? SSPs? What are those? Let's quickly cover that before diving deeper into programmatic marketing agencies, or PMAs. Programmatic advertising is a method of buying advertising space in real-time bidding, regardless of the advertising type. For example, I could decide to advertise on Fox News on a specific page on their website using programmatic advertising. This is done through centralized platform, known as demand-side platform, DSP in short. A DSP is like a digital auction room, where you see an inventory you like, you bid on it, and if your bid is the highest, you win. The bidders in this auction are the demand-side platforms, and the sellers are what we call supply-side platforms, or SSPs. These SSPs act as the auctioneer, or the bid callers. They are tasked by the publisher, Fox News in this case, to sell the advertising inventory to the highest bidder. To illustrate this, let's imagine there are thousands of brands in an auction room, but instead of hearts, they want to buy advertising spots. When an interesting impression, meaning an advertising spot, comes up in the auction room, they all have one chance to give a bet about how much they want to bid on this impression. The supply-side platform, which is the auctioneer in this case, then looks at all of the bids and sells this impression to the highest bidder. Simple, right? Some of you may think right now that brands can also do it themselves, as they are already starting to do social media advertising. And for 3 main reasons, it is typically not the best move for them. In 3 words: expertise, complexity, and spending. Complexity. In programmatic advertising, the algorithms are not that good, which means you will likely need to manually steer the campaigns for its duration. The reason is simple: we don't have as much data as social media platforms does. When you logged into TikTok, for instance, the algorithm understands very well what you might be interested in, thanks to the hours you spend on the platforms and all the data you entered when creating an account. But when you're on a news website, you're probably not even logged in. Don't spend too much time in there, and all the website has to identify you are your browser cookies, which isn't much. To illustrate the difference in data levels between programmatic and social media, let's take age targeting as a basic example. On social media platforms, you have provided your age upon registration, but in programmatic advertising, we have to estimate it based on probabilities, often imprecisely, from your browser cookies. And these cookies are typically not that precise. I remember once activating for a programmatic campaign 3 different targeting audiences, supposed to all target 25 to 34 years old individuals. Well, funny enough, upon inspecting the audience we delivered on with a third-party software, we realized that most of the people touched were not even close to this age range. No wonder that the algorithm can't be great in these circumstances, right? Now going to the second word, expertise. To put it simply, if these brands wanted to start doing it themselves, where would they even begin? There are thousands of websites, radio stations, TV channels, and out-of-home screens available. If you're just starting out, you're likely going to waste a significant portion of your budget just finding out what's good and bad. Personally, it took me a year and a half just to map out the available inventory in Europe and its performance, and that's just one region. It takes years to fully understand the market and what's available in it, and brands simply don't have the time or resources to figure this out on their own. These 2 reasons alone make it nearly impossible for a brand to internalize programmatic advertising, as doing so would require an entire team dedicated to it, and given the complexity and expertise needed. But let's say that the team is highly knowledgeable and ready to manage it internally. In that case, we encounter the last issue: money. These platforms are expensive to use, really expensive to use. Typically, the minimum advertising spend required to obtain an access to a DSP is $200,000 a year. And in most cases, with this amount, you would get the worst possible conditions and a high cost taken from you in fees by the platforms. So for a budget of $200K, it's possible that only $120,000 would actually be spent in purchasing advertising inventory. And this is why programmatic is so profitable for agencies. Previously, they were fighting for 5 to 10% of the brand's budget. Now they can even take 20%, and it will still be more profitable for the brands to run with them. So it is more profitable and less competitive than SMA? Yes and no. The brilliant innovation of programmatic advertising is still relatively unknown to most agencies, providing a significant advantage over competitors. Not only that, but it also gives agencies a strong argument for taking over the social media advertising of brands. Since the agency is now handling programmatic advertising, it makes sense to have both under the same roof to allow both channels to benefit from each other. Coordinating and sharing learnings between social media and programmatic advertising would otherwise be a missed opportunity. But so, where is the catch? Well, for very large agencies, it is actually the American dream. They have the workforce, the funds, and the expertise. However, for the same reason it's not profitable for brands, it is very challenging for an agency to start in programmatic advertising without working with an expert who can secure good deals for them. Not to mention that if they don't meet the minimum required spend, they are going to have a very difficult time in the first few years. And this is why what programmatic advertising set out to do, meaning making advertising accessible for everyone, may end up doing the opposite. The large agencies get larger, while the smaller ones struggle to compete for crumbs. But fortunately, there's hope. Because it's not the case yet. Thanks to some agencies and DSPs who have committed to making trading accessible to all, it's possible for anyone to start in the field and build a career out of it. This is, for example, what I personally work on with some collaborators. We help small agencies start in the field for very favorable conditions, as we know that once they grow, they will likely not forget it and continue to work with us. And so that's why PMAs are growing so much in popularity. And there are many other reasons why PMAs are so popular, but we'll keep that for another time. Thanks for following along. If you're interested in learning more about PMAs, feel free to check our online courses in the description. Let us know if you enjoyed the video and what you would like to see in the next one. Thank you for your time and have a lovely one.